By the time she was 22, Marigold Ashcombe had learned one rule the hard way. Never sleep too deep in a place without a lock. Nobody taught her that. Life did. For over a decade, everything Marigold owned fit inside a faded blue canvas bag with a broken strap. 2 shirts, a pair of wool socks, a toothbrush wrapped in a paper napkin, a photograph of her father sealed in plastic to keep out the rain, and one small handkerchief. Cream-colored, fraying at the edges, embroidered with a single letter, W. That letter was the only piece of her mother she had left, and a mother she had spent every one of those winters believing had chosen to walk away from her. On the night this story begins, Marigold was asleep behind a 24-hour laundromat in South Boston. Warm air pushed through a vent above her head. It smelled like dryer sheets. It smelled almost like a home she used to have. She did not know it yet. But 300 miles north, in a stone house perched above the cold Atlantic, an old man had just died. He had spent the last 3 years of his life searching for her. He had left her a house, a crumbling one, the kind everyone else would call worthless. And beneath that house, behind a locked steel door, was the truth about why a 9-year-old girl with a trust fund had spent so many winters sleeping on the ground. She was curled on her side, her knees drawn up, the blue bag tucked under her cheek like a pillow, her boots still on, because you never knew that when you would need to run. The rain had stopped an hour ago. The sky above the alley was a soft, wet gray. Somewhere down the block, a bus hissed to a stop. Marigold woke at 5, not because of a clock, because of the cold. The vent had shifted. Her cheek felt raw against the concrete. She sat up, rubbed her face with the back of her hand, checked her bag, ran her fingers over the outline of the photograph. Then the handkerchief. Then the small pocket knife she kept in the side pouch. All there. She stood, her knees popped. She was 22 years old and her knees popped like a woman 4 times her age. She knew a place off Dorchester Avenue where you could get a paper cup of coffee for $1 and the woman behind the counter would sometimes let you use the bathroom to wash your face. Marigold was careful never to abuse it. She never stayed too long. She never asked for anything free. She smiled small. She said thank you. She wiped down the sink when she was done. That was how you kept a warm place. You made yourself easy to forget. The bell above the door chimed when she walked in. The woman at the register nodded, went back to her newspaper. Marigold ordered her coffee, sat by the window, watched the sky lighten over the rooftops. She was on her second sip when the man in the dark coat walked in. He was old, 70s maybe, silver hair combed neatly to one side, a wool overcoat that looked like it cost more than everything Marigold had owned in the last decade combined. He carried a leather briefcase. He did not order anything. He looked around the room once. Then he looked at Marigold and walked straight toward her. Marigold's whole body went still. Men in expensive coats did not walk toward women like her. Not with anything good. Her hand slid to the strap of her bag. Ready. Marigold Ashcombe. She did not answer. My name is Wendell Crane. I'm an attorney. She still did not answer. Attorneys meant courts. Courts meant nothing good for a girl with no address. He set his briefcase down on the empty chair across from her. He waited. I've been looking for you for 9 days. Her throat felt tight. Why? May I sit? She looked at him for a long moment. His shoes were polished but scuffed at the toe. His eyes were tired. Not cruel, tired. Just old tired. She nodded. A man named Alistair Thorne passed away last week. He was a friend of your father's. The name hit her like cold water down the spine. Alistair Thorne. She hadn't heard that name spoken out loud in 13 years. Not since a wet church parking lot, not since a man in a black coat had knelt down in front of her and told her he would take care of her. She had been 9. He had never come back. He's dead, she said, flat. Yes. When, 12 days ago, a stroke. Marigold stared at the paper cup in her hands. She could feel the warmth through the thin cardboard, and she focused on that. Because if she did not focus on something small, she was going to start crying in front of a stranger. And she had a rule about that, too. Never cry where they can see. Miss Ashcombe, Mr. Thorne left instructions concerning you. She looked up. What kind of instructions? Wendell opened his briefcase. A will. Outside the window, a delivery truck rumbled past. A radio was playing softly in the back. Something old, something slow. Marigold did not know it yet. But before the week was over, she would be given the first house anyone had ever called hers. And she would learn something far worse than being forgotten. Alistair Thorne had remembered her every single day, and she had still ended up on the street. 3 days later, Marigold Ashcombe stood on a sidewalk in Portland, Maine, and thought about walking away. The law office was in a red brick building overlooking the harbor. Big windows, a brass plate by the door, the kind of place she would have crossed the street to avoid a week ago. She smoothed the front of her coat. It was a donation coat, wool, too big in the shoulders. She had spent 20 minutes that morning in a bus station restroom trying to make her hair look presentable. She still felt like everyone who walked past could smell the alley on her. Her blue canvas bag was over her shoulder. Wendell had told her she did not need to bring anything. She brought it anyway. She always did. Inside a reception looked up. Her eyes did a small, quick sweep. The coat, the bag, the boots. Marigold saw her decide something in the space of a second and then decide to hide it. Miss Ashcombe, they're waiting for you. The conference room had a long table. Windows facing the harbor, a pitcher of water on a silver tray. Marigold sat where the receptionist pointed. She placed the bag between her feet. Then the door opened, and Vivian Thorne walked in. Marigold had not expected her to be beautiful. She was maybe 62. Silver blonde hair pinned back, pearls. A charcoal wool suit that fit her the way suits fit women who never wore anything twice. She had the kind of face that had learned decades ago exactly how much to smile. Behind her came a man in his early 30s, dark hair, tired eyes, a blue tie loosened at the collar. "Rupert, behave!" Rupert glanced at Marigold's boots, then her bag, then away. Wendell entered last. He closed the door. "Shall we begin?" He began to read. Alistair Thorne had lived in a world Marigold could barely picture. A house on the coast, a shipping company, warehouses, ships with names painted in white on their hulls, trusts, foundations, charitable boards. Vivian received the coastal home, most of the public wealth. Rupert received shares in Thorne Maritime, a commercial marina in Rockland. Marigold stared at her hands. She had not expected anything. Wendell turned the page. "And to Marigold Rose Ashcombe." She looked up. "I leave the property known as 42 Blackpine Lane outside the village of Thornhaven, Maine, including the residence and approximately 20 acres of surrounding land." Marigold blinked. "I'm sorry, what? Mr. Thorne left you a house." Rupert made a small sound, somewhere between a laugh and a cough. "That place is still standing." "Rupert, I'm just saying, the last time anyone looked at Blackpine, it was one storm away from falling into the sea." Marigold turned to Wendell. "Is it mine?" "Yes." "Is there a mortgage?" "No." Something inside her went very quiet. No mortgage, no landlord, no shelter worker turning on the lights at 6 in the morning, telling her to gather her things. She looked down at the blue bag between her boots. "Does the door lock?" The room went silent. Rupert frowned. "What? The house. Does the door lock?" Nobody answered at first. Wendell finally nodded. "Yes." She swallowed. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. "Then it's more than I had yesterday." For a long moment, nobody spoke. Vivian leaned forward. Her voice was gentle, the kind of gentle that had been practiced. "Marigold. May I call you Marigold?" Marigold said nothing. Alistair could be sentimental, especially near the end. That property has been neglected for many years. The plumbing, the roof, the wiring. It would take a fortune to make it livable. And even then, she paused, delicately. "Even then, dear, it is not the kind of place a young woman should be alone. I've been alone in worse places." Vivian's smile did not move. But something behind her eyes did. Only for a second. Most people would have missed it. Marigold did not. Sleeping in doorways had taught her to notice small things. The way a hand moved toward a phone, the way a manager's voice changed. The exact moment kindness became inconvenience. Vivian reached into her handbag. "I'd like to make you an offer, right here, right now, so that you don't have to worry." She slid a folded piece of paper across the table. $180,000. For the property, cash. Wired to any account you like by tomorrow morning. Marigold looked at the paper. She did not touch it. $180,000. She tried to make her mind understand what that number meant. She could not. She had counted her money in single dollars for so long that anything with more than 3 zeros felt like a foreign language. $180,000 was not money. It was a door out of her whole life. She could feel Vivian watching her. She could feel Rupert watching her. She could feel the receptionist somewhere down the hall, pretending not to listen. She looked past all of them, out the window, at the harbor, and she thought about a 9-year-old girl who had slept with her shoes on because she did not know where morning would take her. That girl had waited for someone. That girl was still waiting. Marigold slid the paperback across the table. No, thank you. Vivian blinked. Just once. But she blinked. I'm sorry. I'd like to see the house first. Rupert leaned back. He laughed under his breath. You're going to see it. Fine, see it, then take the money. Vivian raised a hand without looking at him. He went quiet. Marigold, that is a very generous offer. It is more than the property is worth. I'm trying to be kind to you. I know. She meant it. That was the strange part. She could feel the kindness pouring off Vivian Thorne like heat from a stove. Warm, careful, perfectly measured. And she could feel underneath it something else. Something colder. Something that had nothing to do with her at all. Vivian wanted the house. Not the money, not the sale, the house. Marigold did not know why, but she knew what wanting looked like on a person who thought they were hiding it. She had seen it too many times. Wendell cleared his throat. There is one additional item. He reached into his briefcase. He drew out a thick red envelope. Marigold's name was written across the front in a slightly uneven hand. Her chest tightened. That handwriting. She had seen it once before. On a small white card. A card that had come with a stuffed bear at a funeral. She had lost the card in the 3rd foster home. She had lost the bear in the 5th. But she remembered the handwriting. Mr. Thorne instructed me to give this to you only if you attended in person. He set the envelope on the table. Then he placed 2 keys beside it. The first was small and silver, ordinary. The second was old, heavy, brass, worn smooth in the center from a thumb that had rubbed it over and over for a long time. Marigold reached for the brass key first. She did not know why. Wendell watched her. That one, he said quietly. He asked me to make sure you received last. Vivian's eyes moved to the brass key, and for the first time since she had walked into the room, the smile on her face slipped. It slipped for half a second. Then it was back. But Marigold had seen it. Vivian stood. She reached for her coat. She stepped around the table. She paused beside Marigold's chair. She lowered her voice so that only Marigold could hear. Some doors, she said gently, are safer left closed. She smiled once more. Warm, practiced. Then she walked out. Rupert followed. He glanced back once at Marigold. He did not smile. The door clicked shut. Marigold waited until she could not hear their footsteps down the hall anymore. Then she looked at Wendell. Mr. Crane, did he ever tell you why he left me the house? Wendell took off his glasses. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. He said one thing. She waited. He said, Vivian notices what things cost. Wendell put his glasses back on. And Marigold notices what they mean. Her eyes filled. She looked down at the brass key. A few minutes later, alone in the conference room, she opened the red envelope. Inside was a single card, 3 lines. You survive because you learn to see what others ignore. Do not trust what looks worthless. Come home, Marigold. She read the last line again. Come home. She pressed her hand against her mouth. She did not make a sound. She had learned a long time ago how to cry the way she had learned to sleep. Quietly, so no one else would notice. Nobody had told Marigold Ashcombe to come home in over a decade. Because until that moment, there had been nowhere for her to go. That afternoon, she boarded a northbound bus with her blue canvas bag pressed against her chest. In one coat pocket was the silver key to a broken house. In the other was a brass key to something no one had explained. 3 rows behind her, a man in a dark jacket lowered his phone. He had just taken a photograph of the back of Marigold's head. He sent it to a number saved as only a letter. 4 words. She's on her way. By the time the bus reached the Thornhaven turnoff, the sun was low. The driver pulled over beside a closed bait shop and pointed north. Black Pine Lane. About 4 miles that way. You got someone picking you up. She gave him her small practice smile. I'll manage. She always did. She started walking. The pines got taller. The houses disappeared. The road turned to gravel. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the ocean. That low, steady breathing sound. She had grown up on a coast like this. She had forgotten how much her body remembered it. Every 10 minutes or so, she glanced behind her. She did not know why. Just habit. Once far down the road, she thought she saw headlights. Then they were gone. 2 hours later, in the last of the evening light, she found the mailbox. 42 Black Pine Lane. The paint on the numbers had faded to gray. Sea salt had eaten at the metal. Beyond it stood the house. Rupert had been right about one thing. It was almost a ruin. The front porch leaned to one side like an old man favoring a bad hip. Half the shingles on the roof were missing. One window was covered with a sheet of warped plywood. Dead ivy crawled up the chimney. A shutter hung by a single nail. Marigold stood at the end of the drive, and then quietly she laughed. A tired laugh. A soft laugh. The kind of laugh you laugh when you have finally reached the last place you were afraid to reach. "You're beautiful," she whispered, because most people would have seen decay. Marigold saw walls. She saw a roof, mostly. She saw a front door. She climbed the porch. The boards groaned. She slid the silver key into the lock. It turned with a small click that she felt in her chest. The door opened. Inside, the air smelled of old wood smoke, and dust. Furniture sat under white sheets like sleeping shapes. A stone fireplace filled the far wall. She stepped inside. She closed the door behind her. She locked it 3 times. Only then did she breathe. That night, she built a small fire in the stone fireplace. The chimney worked. She almost cried at that. She ate crackers from her bag. She drank water from a plastic bottle. There was no electricity. She did not care. For the first time in years, no stranger was sleeping 6 feet away from her. She spread her coat on the floor near the hearth. She placed her bag under her head. She lay down. She almost fell asleep. Then she noticed the ashes. Marigold sat up. The fire she had built was small. It had burned down to a soft glow. Beneath the new coals, she could see an older layer of ash. Gray. Soft. Recent. Someone had used this fireplace, not years ago, days ago. Her hand went slowly to the fireplace poker resting against the stone. She looked at the front door. Locked. The house went very quiet. Then from outside, she heard a footstep. She froze. Another footstep. Closer, the porch boards creaked. Slow, careful, the step of someone who did not want to be heard. The doorknob moved. Just a little. Then again, she stood up. She did not breathe. "Who's there?" Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. No answer. The porch creaked once more. Whoever was out there had taken a step back. Then 3 hard knocks struck the door. "Miss Ashcombe." A man's voice. Old, weathered, calm. She said nothing. "My name is Barnaby Finch. Alistair Thorne asked me to look after this property." Alistair. Marigold did not lower the poker. "Prove it." A pause. Then the man laughed. A single short laugh. Not mocking, almost fond. "You've got more sense than Alistair gave you credit for." A photograph slid under the door. Marigold crouched, one hand still on the poker, and picked it up. It was old. The corners were bent. It showed Alistair Thorne, younger, in a canvas jacket, standing next to another man. Broad-shouldered, bearded. Behind them was this house. She slid the chain across. She opened the door 2 inches. The man on the porch looked exactly like the photograph, only older. His beard had gone almost white. His face was carved by weather. His eyes went straight to the poker in her hand. "Good," he said quietly. "Good. Never open a door out here without something in your hand." She stared at him. "You knew Alistair?" "Since we were 19 years old." "Then why did he leave me this place?" Barnaby Finch looked past her toward the fireplace. The small fire. The old ash. His face changed. "Because he hoped you'd notice." She lowered the poker, only a little. "Notice what?" He did not answer, not right away. "Miss Ashcombe, may I come in?" She hesitated. Then she slid the chain off. She stepped back. Barnaby walked inside. He wiped his boots on the mat. He nodded once at the fire. He walked straight to the hearth. He knelt. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he reached into the fireplace and gently brushed the old ash aside. Beneath the ash was a small iron ring set flat into the stone. Her heart began to pound. That wasn't there before. It was. He wrapped his fingers around the ring. "You just couldn't see it." He pulled. There was a low mechanical click beneath the floor, a soft grinding sound, something old, something that had been kept oiled. A narrow section of the stone hearth began to shift. Marigold stepped back. The stone lifted, slowly, cleanly, revealing a set of concrete stairs descending into the dark. Cold, dry air rose out of the opening. Not damp, not musty, something cleaner, controlled. "What is this?" Barnaby stood. He brushed the dust off his knees. Alistair started building this about 3 years ago, after his accountant died. Down at the bottom of the stairs, a faint light flickered on. Automatic, a soft, yellow glow. Marigold reached into her coat pocket. Her fingers closed around the brass key. "What's down there?" Barnaby's face was very still. "The reason he spent the last 3 years of his life looking for you." She took the first step. The stairs were narrow. The walls on either side were bare concrete. Her hand slid along the cold surface as she descended. 10 steps. 15. At the bottom, a small landing, and then a steel door. There was no handle, only an old brass lock. She drew the key from her pocket. Her hand was shaking. She fit the key into the lock. It turned as if it had been waiting for her. The lock clicked. Behind her at the top of the stairs, Barnaby's voice came down, quiet, careful. Whatever you find in there, Marigold, remember one thing. She looked back. He was standing at the top, silhouetted against the firelight. Alistair was ashamed. Her chest tightened. Of what? Barnaby lowered his eyes. Of how long it took him to see what they'd done to you. Marigold turned back to the steel door. She placed her palm flat against the cold metal. She thought of a 9-year-old girl on the wet steps of a church. She thought of a promise. She pushed. The door swung open, and on the other side beneath a house everyone called worthless, waiting under a single soft yellow light, was the beginning of the truth about who had stolen so many years of her life. The room was not what she had expected. There were no stacks of cash, no gold, no jewels, nothing that looked the way people described treasure in stories. It was in a strange way a relief. Instead, there were shelves, rows of them, filing cabinets against one wall, cardboard archive boxes stacked neatly against another, and a single desk under a bank of fluorescent lights. On the desk sat a laptop. Beside the laptop, a leather-bound journal. Everything was clean, dry, protected. Marigold walked slowly to the desk. The journal had a name pressed into the leather in small gold letters. Alistair Thorne. She reached out. She touched the letters. She opened the journal. The first page had only one sentence, written in that same slightly uneven hand. If Marigold is reading this, then I finally found a way to bring her home. She closed the journal. She pressed her hand over her mouth. She stood there in the yellow light of a room she had not known existed, in the basement of a house she had not known she owned. And for the first time since she was 9 years old, Marigold Ashcombe cried without trying to be quiet about it, because someone had remembered her. She sat down in the chair. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. She opened the journal again. The handwriting was calmer here, older, steady. She began to read. She turned another page, then another, and beside the journal, waiting quietly on the desk, was the laptop, with a single video file on the screen. Named simply, Marigold. Her hand hovered over the keyboard. She looked at the screen. She clicked play. And on the screen, in a hospital blanket thinner than the photographs, gentler than she remembered, Alistair Thorne looked into the camera. And he looked somehow straight at her. He drew a slow breath. Then, before he said a single word, he held something up to the lens. A photograph, an old one, faded at the edges. A young woman with tired eyes and dark hair was sitting on a hospital bed. In her arms was a baby wrapped in a pale yellow blanket. The woman was looking down at the baby with the kind of look Marigold had spent so long trying to remember and never quite could. Marigold leaned closer to the screen. Her hand went to the handkerchief in her pocket. The letter W, embroidered in the corner. Winifred. Her mother's name. Marigold's breath caught. "Mom," she whispered, to an empty room, to a screen, to a woman she had spent so long believing had not wanted her. On the screen, Alistair Thorne slowly lowered the photograph. He looked into the camera, and he opened his mouth to speak. Marigold. His voice broke on her name. She pressed both hands over her mouth. "I made your father a promise before you were born. I made you a promise the day I buried him. And I have failed to keep both of them for a very long time." He looked down. He was quiet for a while. "I could tell you I was busy. I could tell you I trusted the wrong people. Both of those things would be true. Neither of them would be enough." He looked up again. "So I'm not going to ask you to forgive me. I'm going to tell you what happened, because you deserve to know. And because there are things in this room that you will need to understand before certain people come looking for them." Marigold's fingers tightened around the edge of the desk. "Your father and I set up a trust for you when your mother was still pregnant. I want you to hear that clearly, Marigold. Before you were even born, your father made sure you would be taken care of." Marigold closed her eyes. "There was enough for your schooling, for medical care, for a home when you needed one, and when you turned 21 enough to give you a start. Not a fortune, a start." She could hear the wind above her outside the house. "You should never have slept outside, Marigold. Not one night, not 1 hour." Her eyes filled again. "3 years ago, my accountant died. When he passed, I asked another firm to come in and go through everything. Just a routine review. That is all it was supposed to be." He stopped. That is when I found the transfers. She leaned closer to the screen. Small ones at first, from a trust I had almost forgotten about. Your trust. Then, larger ones, routed through consulting firms I did not recognize. Then through a foundation. Then another foundation. Then into private accounts. His jaw tightened. It took me almost 18 months to follow the money. He looked directly into the camera. I want to say this next part slowly, so there is no mistake. He waited a beat. The person who moved the money out of your trust was my wife, Vivian. Her whole body went cold. She thought of Vivian's hand on the back of the chair, the way she had said dear, the way she had looked at the blue canvas bag between Marigold's feet and had not looked at Marigold's face. Alistair kept speaking. She did it through her charities, which is the part I'm ashamed of because I helped her build those charities. I stood next to her at ribbon cuttings. I signed checks. I was proud of her. He shook his head. Some of the money went through a network of shelters and outreach programs on the eastern seaboard, New Haven, Providence, Portland, Boston. Places where nobody with power ever looks too closely at the paperwork because the people the money is supposed to be helping do not have lawyers. Marigold's stomach turned. She knew those cities. She had slept in those cities. She had eaten meals from those programs. She had signed her name in those intake books in the wobbly cursive of a 15-year-old, then a 16-year-old, then a 17-year-old, hoping the bunk would still be there when she came back from her shift. Alistair's voice went very soft. Marigold, I am so sorry. She stared at him. I am so sorry, he said again. She realized she was shaking, because it was not just the money, it was the shape of the thing. Vivian Thorne, silver-haired and beloved, standing at podiums under warm lights, handing oversized checks to charities that Marigold had eaten dinner at. Somewhere in Portland, a paid photographer had taken a photograph of Vivian, smiling next to a bowl of donated soup. And somewhere in that same building on that same night, Marigold had been curled on a cot with her boots on, trying to sleep light, in case someone stole her bag. Vivian had built her reputation on buildings paid for, with Marigold's stolen future. Marigold laughed. One sharp, broken sound. Then she covered her mouth with both hands, because she had blamed herself. Every job she had lost because she had no address. Every apartment application she could not fill out. Every foster mother who had looked at her and decided she was too much work. Every closed door. Every side eye. Every time a stranger had crossed the street because Marigold's coat was dirty. She had thought there was something wrong with her. She had thought her father had left her nothing. She had thought her mother had walked out because Marigold was not worth staying for. She had spent all that time believing that if she were a better girl, easier to love, easier to keep quieter, prettier, luckier, someone would have taken her in. And all of it had been a lie, a carefully arranged lie built with pearls and press releases, on top of a 9-year-old girl in wet church clothes. On the screen, Alistair's voice pulled her back. There is more you need to know. She nodded. To the screen, to no one. About your mother. Her breath stopped. Marigold, your mother did not leave you the way you think. Her hand went to the handkerchief in her pocket. She squeezed it. I have not been able to find her yet. But I have been trying, because when I started following Vivian's money, I found her name. Marigold could not breathe. Winifred, your mother is somewhere, and she was lied to too. He looked down, then he looked up again. He opened his mouth to say more. He coughed, once, then twice, then harder. A woman in white stepped into the frame. A nurse. She put a hand on Alistair's shoulder. Alistair raised a hand toward the camera. Marigold, there is one more thing you need to know about Vivian. He coughed again. The video cut off. The screen went black. Marigold sat frozen. Then very slowly she reached into her coat pocket. She took out the handkerchief. She placed it on the desk beside the laptop, smoothed it flat. The letter, "W, Mom," she whispered. Her voice cracked. You didn't leave me. She said it again softer. You didn't leave me. She lowered her forehead to the desk. She held the handkerchief in both hands. And for the first time in her adult life, Marigold Ashcombe let herself feel a very small, very dangerous thing. Hope. Vivian Thorne came for the house 2 days later. Not with police, not with lawyers, with coffee. Marigold saw the black SUV through the front window at 9 in the morning. Her first instinct was to reach for her bag. She actually did reach for it. It was on the back of a kitchen chair. Her hand stopped in the air. She looked at the bag. All those years of practice packed up and waiting. She thought of Alistair's face on the screen. She thought of the yellow room downstairs. She thought of the handkerchief on the desk. She thought very quietly, no, not this time. She walked to the front door. She opened it before Vivian could knock. Vivian was on the porch, holding 2 paper cups. Camel coat this time. Pearls again. That same smile. Behind her stood Rupert. I thought we might talk. She held out one of the cups. Marigold did not take it. No, thank you. May we come in? No. That surprised all 3 of them. Marigold, most of all. Vivian lowered the cups slowly. She smiled a little wider, the way you smile at a joke you are pretending to find charming. Then perhaps we can talk out here. Rupert stepped forward. 200,000 for the property. No greeting, no warm-up. Just the number. She let herself picture it for exactly 3 seconds. A warm apartment. A refrigerator with food inside. A bed with sheets. Boots bought new instead of donated. Then she blinked, and the picture was gone. Why, Rupert frowned. Why is this place worth $200,000 to you? You called it a shack in front of your mother's lawyer 3 days ago. His jaw twitched. The land. 20 acres. In the middle of nowhere. Overlooking a coast that erodes 10 inches a year. It's not worth $200,000, not to a stranger. Vivian stepped smoothly between them. My son is impatient, that's all. I noticed. Vivian's smile did not move. But her eyes did, just for a second. She reached into her coat pocket. Marigold, dear, I want to tell you something. Marigold waited. I knew your parents. Silence. 6 words, delivered like the softest possible knife. She had spent decades learning where to put sentences like that. Marigold felt her back straighten. Your father was one of the most loyal men I have ever met. He and Alistair fished together off this very coast when they were both 20 years old. And your mother. A small pause, a smaller sigh. Your mother was lovely. You knew her. I met her a few times, yes. You knew she had a daughter. The smallest hesitation. Of course. Then you knew about me. Silence. Rupert's eyes flicked to his mother. I knew Silas and Winifred had a child. Yes. Marigold stepped forward. Just one step. But Vivian noticed. You donated to shelters in Portland. I donate to many organizations. I slept in one. Silence. The wind moved in the pines above the house. Vivian looked away first. It lasted less than a heartbeat. It was there. And then, it was gone. She turned her face back to Marigold, warm again, sad again, kind again, practiced again. Dear, please take the offer. No. You are 22 years old. You have never owned property. You have no idea what taxes are. You have no idea what insurance costs. You have no idea what a new roof costs. You're right. Vivian blinked. I'm sorry. You're right. I don't know any of those things. Yet. I'm going to learn. Rupert made a small sound. You're going to learn. In a house with no electricity. Marigold looked at him. I've done harder things with less. He opened his mouth. He closed it. Vivian touched his sleeve. Only her fingertips. Rupert stepped back. For the first time, the warmth in Vivian's face thinned. Just a little. Take the offer, Marigold. Why? Because some doors are safer left closed. There it was, twice now. Different rooms, same sentence. She understood then. That Vivian had already said everything she was going to say. That she had made her choice. That the smile had been a shape she wore. Not a person she was. Thank you for the coffee, Mrs. Thorne. I'd like you to leave now. Vivian looked at her for a very long moment. Then she smiled once more. Sadly. Perfectly. Don't take too long to think about it, dear. She turned. She walked down the porch steps. Rupert followed. He glanced back once at the leaning porch. He glanced back once at Marigold. He did not smile. But something in his eyes was different. Something like a man who had just heard in his mother's voice something he did not want to have heard. The SUV pulled out of the drive. Gravel crunched under the tires. The engine faded down the pines. Marigold stayed on the porch until she could no longer hear it. Then her knees began to shake. She sat down on the top step. She pressed her forehead into her hands. She did not cry, but she did not stand up for a long time either. 20 minutes later, Barnaby Finch stepped out of the trees. He had a canvas bag over his shoulder and a battered thermos in one hand. He climbed the steps. He sat down beside her without asking. He unscrewed the thermos. He poured her a cup of coffee. Real coffee, hot. He held it out to her. It's not poisoned. She almost laughed. She took the cup. They sat in silence for a while. Rupert's right, Barnaby raised an eyebrow. About which part? I don't know how to do this. I don't know how trusts work. I don't know property law. Yesterday I read one page of Alistair's journal 3 times because I didn't understand half the words. Barnaby nodded. That tracks. She looked at him. That's not helpful? No, but it's honest. He leaned back against the porch post. Alistair didn't know how to run a shipping company when he started one. He had money. No, he had a borrowed truck and your father's telephone number. Marigold went very still. Barnaby reached into his jacket. He pulled out a business card. He held it out without looking at her. Call her. Marigold took the card. Prudence Holloway, attorney at law. Bangor, Maine. Who is she? Someone Alistair trusted before he stopped trusting most people. Will she believe me? Barnaby shook his head. No. Marigold's face fell. Barnaby glanced at her. She'll leave the evidence. That's better. He stood up. He set the thermos on the porch beside her. Keep it. It's supposed to snow tonight. He walked back down into the trees. She called Prudence Holloway in the morning. Prudence Holloway was 68. Silver hair cut short. Reading glasses on a beaded chain. She had the disconcerting habit of not filling silences. She just let them sit, until whoever was across from her started saying more than they had planned to. Marigold sat across from her in a small office over a bookstore in Bangor. She had spread out everything on Prudence's desk. Copies of Alistair's journal, printouts of the ledgers from the Yellow Room, screenshots of the video. Prudence read for 2 hours. Finally, Prudence took off her reading glasses. She placed them on the desk. Vivian Thorne. Yes. Vivian Thorne has spent 25 years building a reputation for generosity in this state. Hospital boards, children's charities, housing programs. Her face is on a plaque at the wing of a hospital I go to. I know. Prudence folded her hands. If this becomes public, one question will follow you into every courtroom and every newspaper. Do you know what that question is? Marigold looked her in the eye. Why should anyone believe a homeless girl over Vivian Thorne? Prudence's mouth moved. Just a little. Something like a smile. That's right, Marigold breathed out. They shouldn't. Prudence raised one eyebrow. They should believe the records, not me. Prudence stared at her for a long moment. Then she nodded once, slowly. Good answer. She pulled the folder toward herself. If we do this, we do not threaten Vivian. We do not call reporters. We do not make accusations we cannot prove. We follow every dollar. We build a paper trail so tight she cannot walk out of it. Okay, it'll be ugly Marigold. She will fight. She will hurt you in ways that have nothing to do with money. Marigold thought of Vivian's smile. I know. Prudence looked at her for a long moment. There is one more thing I need to ask you. What do you want out of this? Marigold opened her. She closed it. She thought of the Yellow Room, the video, the photograph of a young woman with tired eyes holding a baby wrapped in a pale yellow blanket. She looked back up. I want to know where my mother is. Prudence was quiet for a beat. Then she nodded. All right, we'll add that. The first photograph appeared online 11 days later. Marigold was standing outside a bus station in Providence. She recognized the coat. She recognized the blue bag. She recognized the way her chin was tucked against her chest. Above the photograph, in large black letters, a headline. Homeless woman claims connection to Thorne fortune. By the afternoon, there were 3 more articles. By the evening, 7. Some called her a mystery heiress. Some called her an opportunist. One local television commentator in a segment that was replayed for a week asked in a very concerned voice why a respected businessman would leave any part of his estate to a transient with no verified employment history. Prudence called just after dark. Don't read the comments. I already did. Then stop. Marigold sat down on the kitchen floor. The next morning, legal papers arrived. Vivian was challenging Alistair's will, diminished capacity, undue influence, possible exploitation. Marigold almost laughed. Prudence began filing motions, account reviews, trust records, subpoenas. Marigold tried to keep up. She read until her eyes burned. She wrote unfamiliar words in the margins of a cheap spiral notebook. Fiduciary, beneficiary, misappropriation. She looked them up one at a time on a library computer in the next town. At meetings, men in expensive suits sometimes explained things to Prudence while barely looking at Marigold. Once an accountant hired to review the records asked if Marigold wanted to wait outside while the adults handled the numbers. Prudence very slowly removed her glasses. Marigold touched her arm. "No, thank you," Marigold said politely. Then she looked at the accountant. Page 47. The transfer on March 8th, 4 years ago. Why was it routed through a housing charity in New Haven before it reached a consulting firm in Delaware? The room went quiet. He turned to page 47. He never asked her to wait outside again. She learned quickly what she did not know. She learned even more quickly what she did. She knew shelters. She knew intake procedures. She knew which programs did receipts and which programs did not. She knew which cities kept their donor rolls online and which kept them on paper in a locked file drawer that a foundation secretary would forget to lock at 4 p.m. on a Friday. She knew because she had watched. From cots, from folding chairs, from the corner of the coffee line, for years. Prudence, watching her lay out this map of Vivian's, giving one afternoon, said only one thing. "You paid attention." Marigold did not answer. Because she had not paid attention. She had had to. When you slept in a place, you learned it. That was survival. Now, for the first time in her life, the thing she had learned in the alleys was the thing no one else at the table possessed. Experience. But strength did not arrive all at once. Some nights it disappeared completely. 6 weeks into the case, Prudence drove out to Black Pine Lane. Her expression told Marigold the news before she opened her mouth. Vivian's attorneys are requesting temporary control of the property. Marigold's stomach dropped. Can they take the house? They can try. If a judge grants it, then we lose control of who sees what and when. Marigold looked at the fireplace. For the first time, the house did not feel safe. Prudence stayed for a while. She drank tea Marigold made on the small camp stove, and then she left. Marigold sat by the fire until the fire went out. At 2 in the morning, she got up. She did what she had done 100 times before. She packed the bag, 2 shirts, wool socks, toothbrush, photograph of her father, handkerchief. It took less than 3 minutes. All those years of practice made leaving easy. She pulled on her coat. She put the bag over her shoulder. She stood at the front door. Her hand touched the lock. She thought of Rupert. You're still homeless. You just have an address now. Maybe he was right. Maybe people like her did not keep houses. She closed her eyes. She stood in the dark front room for what felt like a long time. Then, for a reason she could not name, she went downstairs. She was still wearing the bag. She sat down in Alistair's chair in the yellow room in front of the dark laptop. "I tried to say," she whispered. There was no one to answer. Her hand went to the leather journal. She meant to pick it up. Instead, her fingers slipped on the cover. The journal fell to the floor. It opened near the back. She bent down to pick it up. She stopped. There was handwriting inside the leather back cover. Very small. She had never noticed it. One sentence. "A home is not where nobody can remove you." Below it, another sentence written later in a shakier hand. "A home is where you finally decide to stay." Marigold stared at the words. Once, twice, a third time. Her hand went slowly to the strap on her shoulder. She understood then, in one clean, cold second. Vivian did not need to win in court. She only needed Marigold to run. Marigold slid the bag off her shoulder. She held it against her chest. For a long moment, she did not move. Then she set it down on the floor. "No," she whispered. Her voice shook. She said it again, louder. "No." She went upstairs. She turned on every lamp Barnaby had gotten working. She unpacked the bag on the kitchen counter, one shirt into a drawer, the other into a drawer, wool socks, toothbrush by the sink, not hidden, on the counter, where a person who lived here would put a toothbrush. Then she unwrapped the photograph of her father. She had kept it sealed in plastic for as long as she could remember. She found an old wooden frame in the hall closet. She cleaned the glass with her sleeve. She placed the photograph inside. She put it on the mantel. Then she took the handkerchief from her coat pocket. She smoothed it flat. She set it beside the photograph, the cream cloth, the letter "do," right where anyone walking into her house would see it. Not packed, not hidden. Home. She stood back. 2 small objects on a mantel. A father, a mother. It was not enough. It would never be enough. But it was here. At 7 in the morning, she called Prudence. "I need you to tell me the truth." Prudence was quiet. "Are we going to win?" "I don't know." Marigold nodded. Prudence could not see her nod. All right, what? I'm staying." There was a pause on the line. Then Prudence's voice softened. Good. She was about to hang up. Then Prudence said something else. Marigold. Yes. Prudence hesitated, and it was the first time Marigold had ever heard her hesitate. I have news. She waited. About your mother. Marigold's hand went to the counter, steadying herself. She's alive, Marigold? The house went very quiet. Somewhere above her, the roof creaked in the wind. The waves outside were doing their old steady breathing. A gull called once, far off. Marigold heard none of it. Alive? Yeah. Where? Vermont. Small town. She's been there almost 12 years. Marigold pressed her forehead against the edge of the counter. She could feel her heartbeat in her lips. Marigold, are you there? Yes. Do you want the address? She closed her eyes. She thought of a woman with tired eyes holding a baby in a pale yellow blanket. She thought of a promise on a port. I'll come back for you. Not yet, she whispered. I'm sorry. Not yet. Prudence waited. Marigold took a breath. I don't want to meet my mother while I'm still a person who is running. There was a long silence on the line. Then Prudence said, very quietly, All right. Marigold set the phone down on the counter. She walked into the front room. The fire had gone out during the night. Cold gray ash sat under the grate. Above it on the mantel, her father looked out at her from a wooden frame. Beside him, the letter W in cream thread. She walked to the mantel. She placed her hand flat against it. She stood there for a very long time. Outside, snow began to fall. Small flakes at first, then thicker. She did not know if she would win. She did not know what her mother's voice sounded like anymore. She did not know if forgiveness was a thing she would ever be able to give or receive. She only knew one small thing. She had not run. And for now, that was enough to stand on. The courtroom in Bangor was smaller than she had expected. Old wood, worn carpet, a radiator that clanged twice an hour like an old man clearing his throat, a window with a crack in the corner. Snow was falling past it. Marigold sat beside Prudence at a long table. She wore a gray jacket Prudence had helped her find in a second-hand shop. It fit at the shoulders. She had washed her hair the night before in the kitchen sink at Blackpine. She was not carrying the blue canvas bag. It was at home. The word still felt strange in her mouth. Home. Across the aisle sat Vivian Thorne. Navy suit, pearls, silver blonde hair pinned up. She looked exactly the way a woman like Vivian always looked in a room like this. Like the room had been built around her. Behind her in the first row sat Rupert. He was not looking at his mother. He was not looking at Marigold. He was looking at his own hands. Marigold noticed that. She filed it away. She did not know yet what it meant. The judge and everyone stood. Prudence did not tell the court. Marigold was homeless. She did not describe the alley in Providence. She did not ask anyone to feel sorry for her client. She did the opposite. She presented dates, signatures, trust records, transfers, slide after slide of quiet numbers moving from one account to another. A trust that should have paid for a child's education sliding through a foundation, then through a consulting firm in Delaware, then through another foundation, then into a private account with a name Vivian Thorne had signed on 22 separate documents. Money that should have kept a small girl warm turned into pearls. Vivian's attorneys fought every page. They called the transfers administrative errors. They said accounting had been confused. They said dead employees had made unauthorized decisions. They said a woman as generous as Vivian Thorne could not possibly have known what was happening in her own foundations. Prudence let them talk. She just kept placing paper on the table. By the second morning, 3 of Vivian's arguments had been undone by their own paperwork. By the third morning, one of her attorneys stopped making eye contact with the judge. By the fourth morning, Vivian stopped smiling. Prudence stood. Your Honor, I'd like to call Rupert Thorne to the stand. The room went very still. Vivian turned her head slowly. She looked at her son. Rupert did not look back at her. He stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He walked to the witness box like a man walking somewhere he had been putting off for a long time. He raised his right hand. He swore to tell the truth. He sat. Prudence approached the box. Mr. Thorne, please state your relationship to the defendant. She is my mother. Did you grow up in the Thorne household? Yes. With Alistair Thorne. Rupert paused. It was a small pause, but Marigold felt it in her chest. Yes. He was your stepfather. He was my father. Vivian's face did not move, but something in it went very quiet. Prudence let the sentence sit for a moment. Then she picked up a single document. She walked it to the witness box. Mr. Thorne, do you recognize this signature? Rupert looked at the document. He looked at his own name. Yes. Is that your signature? Yes. And did you authorize this transfer of funds from the Ashcombe Trust to the Bright Harbor Foundation on April 11th, 4 years ago? I signed what my mother put in front of me. Were you aware at the time of signing that the trust in question was the Ashcombe Trust? Were you aware that the beneficiary of that trust was a living person? Rupert's jaw tightened. He looked down. He looked back up. What were you told? I was told the trust was inactive. By whom? Rupert looked at his mother for the first time. By her. Vivian closed her eyes, only for a second, but Marigold saw it. Prudence took another document from the table. She placed it in front of Rupert. Mr. Thorne, 2 weeks ago, you contacted my office. You brought me a folder. Is this the folder? Yes. Where did you find it? In a locked drawer in my mother's study. When? 3 weeks ago. What was in it? Rupert paused. He looked at Marigold for the first time in his life. He really looked at her. Marigold felt it, like a small door opening, in a place she had not known was closed. Letters. Letters from whom? From Alistair Thorne, my father. Letters to whom? To me. He swallowed. Written over the last 3 years, which he never sent, which she never gave me. He said she the way a boy says a word he has been afraid of for a long time. Prudence nodded once. And in those letters, what did Alistair Thorne tell you? Rupert's voice cracked. He steadied it. He told me that a woman named Marigold Ashcombe was owed money, that she was somewhere on the East Coast, and that if he did not find her in time, I should. The courtroom did not move. Marigold's eyes filled. She did not let them spill. Mr. Thorne, one last question. When you signed those authorizations, did your mother tell you the name of the person whose trust you were signing away? Rupert did not look at his mother. He looked at Marigold. Yes. What did she call her? She called her the girl. He paused. She called her the problem. Somewhere in the courtroom, someone breathed out. Vivian did not move. Rupert kept his eyes on Marigold. But she knew her name. It was in the letters she hid. Prudence turned to the judge. No further questions, Your Honor. The courtroom held its breath. Then a small sound, just once, from the back row. Someone in the gallery weeping softly. Marigold did not turn to see who. She was watching Vivian Thorne, and she was watching the woman she had once been afraid of, realize that the child she had pretended did not exist, was staring back at her, fully seen. The verdict came down 2 days later. The court upheld Alistair Thorne's will in full. The disputed trust assets were ordered returned to Marigold Ashcombe. Every dollar, every routing, every fraudulent transfer. Traced, named, reversed. Vivian Thorne's financial dealings were referred to the Maine Attorney General and to the federal authorities. Prudence and Marigold walked out of the building side by side. The reporters were waiting on the steps. Microphones, cameras, notebooks, the kind of hunger you can smell from a block away. Marigold slowed at the top of the steps. Prudence touched her elbow. You don't have to say anything. Marigold looked at the microphones. She looked out over the small square, the bare trees, the snow starting again as she stepped forward. The microphones came up like a wave. Miss Ashcombe, do you feel vindicated? She paused. A year ago, she had not known what vindicated meant. She had looked it up in a library, one word among 100, and written it in her cheap notebook. She knew what it meant now. She was not sure it described what she felt. No. A dozen microphones leaned in closer. I feel sad. A camera lowered. My parents planned for me before I was born. A man named Alistair Thorne kept trying to find me, even when he did not know where to look. Her voice steadied. And people who were supposed to do the right thing decided no one would notice. If one little girl disappeared inside the paperwork, she paused. There are a lot of people the world decides not to notice. Nobody spoke. That's what I feel. I feel sad that we are so good at not noticing them. She stepped back from the microphones. She walked down the steps. Prudence walked beside her. Marigold did not go to Vermont right away. That night at Blackpine, she stood at the mantel, the photograph of her father, the handkerchief with the letter W, the wind pushing at the boards, the dark ocean below the cliffs. She placed her hand flat against the stone. Almost, Mom, she whispered. Almost. She spent a week putting her life in order first. She did not know how to explain to Prudence why. Prudence did not ask. She fixed a shutter. She learned how to bank a fire so it would still be warm in the morning. She swept the old leaves off the porch. Barnaby helped her patch a hole in the roof. She let herself sleep in the bed upstairs for the first time. The first 2 nights she slept in her boots. The third night, she took them off. By the fourth night, she was sleeping through until sunrise. On the seventh morning, she put a small bag in the car, not the blue canvas one, a cheap duffel from a hardware store. She had bought it new. It smelled like a factory. She left the blue canvas bag on the shelf in her bedroom closet, empty. She drove west. The road from Thornhaven to Vermont takes about 6 hours. She drove it in 8. She stopped twice on the shoulder just to breathe. Once at a gas station just to sit in the parking lot for 20 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, looking at the exit sign. The town was small. White houses, a general store, a stone library, a church with a green door. The address led her to a narrow road at the edge of the village. Elm trees, old stone walls. Then a small blue house with a white porch. 2 rocking chairs. Snow on the roof. A bird feeder swinging softly in the wind. Marigold parked at the curb. She sat in the car for 10 minutes. Then she got out. She walked up the path. She climbed the steps. She raised her hand to knock. She could not do it. Her hand stayed in the air, because if she knocked, and the woman inside was not the woman on the video, or if the woman inside was the woman on the video, and did not want her, then Marigold Ashcombe would not know what to do with the rest of her life. She lowered her hand. She almost turned around. Then the door opened on its own. A woman stood there, older than the photograph. Much older. Hair almost all silver, thin at the shoulders. She wore a cardigan the color of a robin's egg. Her hands were small and lined. Her eyes were tired. But her eyes were the same. Marigold had spent so long failing to remember them. She remembered them now. The woman looked at her. She did not speak. Marigold could not speak either. The wind moved the bird feeder. Somewhere a wind chime turned. The woman's eyes went from Marigold's face, to Marigold's coat, to Marigold's hands, to the small square of cream cloth Marigold was holding, the letter W. The woman's face broke, slowly, not all at once, like a wall that had been holding for a very long time and had just now finally been asked to sit down. She put one hand against the door frame. The other she raised toward Marigold. She did not touch her, yet. Her fingers hovered in the air, as if she were afraid Marigold would break, or vanish, or turn out to be a dream she had let herself have for too many years. You kept it. Marigold could not answer. You kept it. Her hand pressed against her mouth. Marigold nodded. Just once, Winifred's knees gave. She sat down, right there on her own front porch. The cardigan bunched under her. She did not seem to notice. Marigold sat down beside her. They did not speak, for a long time. The sun was low behind the elms. The wind chime turned again. Somewhere down the road, a dog barked once. Marigold's shoulder was almost touching her mother's shoulder. Almost. Winifred was the first to speak. I thought you were dead. Marigold closed her eyes. He told me you were dead. Her voice cracked on he. Marigold did not ask who. She already knew. Malcolm Reeve, the man who had walked into their kitchen one afternoon and walked out with her mother 3 months later. Winifred pressed her palms against her cheeks. He said there had been a fire at a foster home in the middle of the night. Marigold felt her throat close. He said you were gone, and it was too dangerous to look for the paperwork, and that I would not survive knowing the details. She turned her face away. I believed him. For a long time, I believed him. Marigold could not stop the tears now. She did not try. For how long? For too long. Winifred's fingers were trembling. I stopped believing him about 8 years ago, but by then, he was gone, and I had no idea where to start. I had no name to give. I had no proof. Every time I called anyone, I was a woman who had abandoned her own child, a woman whose story did not track, a woman whose second husband said things that had turned out to be lies. She looked at Marigold. So I started writing you letters. Marigold's whole body stilled. Winifred stood up slowly. She put out a hand. Come inside. Marigold took her hand. Her mother's hand was warm, warmer than she remembered any hand ever being. Winifred led her through a small front room. Yellow curtains, a blue rug, a cross-stitch on the wall, a photograph on the mantel. Marigold saw it out of the corner of her eye. Her father young in a fisherman's sweater standing on a dock somewhere. Winifred led her up a narrow staircase. She opened a door at the end of the hall. It was a bedroom, a small one, a single bed, a quilt, a rag rug on the floor. At the foot of the bed, a wooden chest. Winifred knelt down beside it. Her hands trembled on the latch. She lifted the lid. Marigold looked inside. 12 boxes, wrapped in different paper, some in gold, some in red, one in blue with white stars, one in soft pink, one in green with a snowflake print, each of them tied with a ribbon, each of them with a small handmade tag. Marigold, age 10. Marigold, age 11, Marigold, age 12. Marigold's knees hit the floor. She did not remember them buckling. She just knew suddenly that she was on the floor, and she could not see clearly, and she was making a sound that she had never made before. Winifred was there, her arms around her, careful, very careful, as if Marigold were still small. I made you a promise on our front porch, a long time ago. Marigold could not speak. I said I would come back for you. Winifred pressed her forehead against her daughter's temple. I never came back. But I never stopped. She held Marigold tighter. Every year, I bought you something. I did not know if you would ever see it, but I could not stop. Marigold reached out one shaking hand. She touched the paper on the closest box. The green one, snowflake print. A tag in her mother's handwriting. Marigold, age 15. She thought of herself. At 15, sleeping outside a hardware store in Worcester, nose bleeding from the cold, waiting for the sunrise, while a woman in a small blue house in Vermont was carefully tying a ribbon around a box for her. Winifred watched her fingers. You can open one. Which one? Anyone. Marigold looked at all of them. She reached slowly to the very back of the chest, to the smallest box, wrapped in yellow tissue paper. Marigold, age 10. She lifted it. It was almost weightless. She looked at her mother. Winifred nodded. Her lips pressed together to hold something in. Marigold untied the ribbon. She peeled the yellow tissue back. Inside was a wool hat, bright yellow, hand-knit, a little uneven at one edge, sized for a small girl. Marigold held it in both hands. She could not breathe. Winifred whispered, I couldn't remember what your favorite color was, so I picked mine. Marigold laughed, wetly, brokenly. She pressed the hat against her chest. Then she leaned her whole weight into her mother. Winifred caught her. They stayed on the floor of a small bedroom in a small blue house in a small town in Vermont for a long time. Neither of them said anything, because a decade of missing someone does not fit into words. It fits into a wool hat, in the wrong color, kept in a chest. For a girl who was not dead, by a mother, who had never stopped believing that miracles were at least a thing worth wrapping presents for. Marigold did not forgive her mother that afternoon. That was not a movie. Real is slower. Real is a mother saying, I don't expect anything from you, and a daughter saying, I don't know yet what I can give, and both of them staying at the kitchen table anyway. Drinking tea. Real is a phone call the next week, and a phone call the week after that. Real is Winifred coming to Blackpine at the beginning of April. Real is the day. Marigold showed her mother the yellow room downstairs, and Winifred saw Alistair's journal on the desk, and Winifred put her hand over her mouth and whispered, he was still trying. Real as the day Winifred met Prudence, and Prudence, without smiling, said, you've raised a very stubborn young woman. And Winifred said quietly, I would like to try to know her. And Marigold, standing in the doorway, realized that her mother had said no, not have, not keep, not make up for, no. That was the sentence Marigold could work with. Spring came. The trust money was recovered. It was more than she had ever let herself imagine having. For weeks, she did nothing with it. She sat with it. She kept working on the house. She fixed the porch board by board. Barnaby taught her how to hold a hammer. She learned that she liked yellow kitchens, that she liked curtains open in the morning, that she disliked with an unexpected intensity decorative pillows, small things, ordinary things, things you only learn when you stay somewhere long enough to have preferences. Then one cold Tuesday night in late April, she drove past a bus station in Portland. She was on her way home from a meeting with Prudence. A young man was asleep against the wall of the station. His backpack was wrapped around one arm. Marigold drove past him. She made it 3 blocks. She turned around. She sat in the parking lot for a long time, watching him, watching a version of herself that the world had decided not to notice. She drove home to Blackpine that night. She did not sleep. By morning, she knew, 6 months later, Ground broke on 20 acres beside a leaning stone house on a coast that eroded 10 inches a year. Not luxury homes. Small cottages. 8 to start. Each with one bedroom. One bathroom, a tiny kitchen, and a front door with a lock. Prudence built the nonprofit. Barnaby oversaw the construction crew. He complained about the concrete deliveries for weeks. He drank a lot of coffee. He was, Marigold noticed, quietly happy in a way she had never seen him. Winifred moved into a small apartment above Black Pine's garage. She insisted on paying rent to her daughter, which made Marigold laugh for the first time in years. Winifred cooked for the construction workers. She started a garden. She made soup on Sundays. Marigold named the place Thorn Harbor, not because Alistair had been perfect. He had not been. But because regret meant very little unless it became a door with a lock. The first residents arrived in November. Young people who had aged out of the foster system. Young people who had left home too early. Young people the state had a file on and no place for. Marigold stood on the porch as a county van pulled up. The girl who got out was 18. Her name was Rowan. She was carrying a black backpack. She held both straps with both hands. She looked at the cottage. She looked at the pines. She looked at Marigold. "Hi," Marigold said quietly. Rowan nodded. She did not smile. Marigold recognized that. "Your room is ready." Rowan looked past her in the small cottage. "How long can I stay?" Not "where is it?" Not "is there Wi-Fi?" "How long can I stay?" Marigold's chest tightened. She felt Winifred behind her on the porch put a hand on her arm. Marigold looked at Rowan. "We'll figure that out together." Rowan's eyes flicked to the cottage door. "Does the bedroom door lock?" For a moment, Marigold was 22 again, sitting in a law office, asking a stranger the same question about a broken house. She smiled gently. "Yes." She reached into her coat pocket. She pulled out a small silver key on a keyring. A tiny wooden tag hung from it. The name of the cottage. She held it out. "You'll have your own key." Rowan took it. She looked down at it fast, but not fast enough. Marigold saw the tears. A key was never just a key, not to a girl who had never had one. That evening, Marigold walked back up to the main house. The porch had been rebuilt. It did not lean anymore. The shingles had been replaced. The plywood on the window had been replaced with real glass. The front door still had its original brass knob. Barnaby had refused to let her change it. She opened the door. Inside, the fire was burning in the stone hearth. On the mantel, her father looked out at her from the wooden frame. Beside him, on a small square of cream cloth, was the letter B. Beside that now was a photograph her mother had brought her in March. A young woman in a fisherman's sweater standing on a dock, laughing at the man behind the camera. Winifred at 22, Marigold's age. Winifred was in the kitchen, making tea. The whole house smelled like something warm. Marigold stopped at the doorway between the two rooms. She watched her mother move. Winifred hummed something. Nothing in particular. Just an old shape of a song. She reached for a mug from the shelf. She poured. She turned around. She saw Marigold watching her. "What?" "Nothing. Come sit down. You look tired." "Rowan just arrived." "I know." She asked how long she could stay. Winifred paused. She set the mug down. "What did you tell her?" "I told her long enough to stop being afraid of mornings." Winifred's hands went still. Her eyes filled. She did not wipe them. She just walked across the kitchen and put her hand against her daughter's cheek, the way she must have done, once, when Marigold was small. Marigold closed her eyes. She let herself be held. That night after her mother went to bed, Marigold walked upstairs. She stopped at her bedroom closet and she opened the door. On the top shelf was the faded blue canvas bag. She reached up. She took it down. She held it in both hands. It was so light. She sat down on the edge of her bed. She set the bag in her lap. An entire life had once fit inside it. 2 shirts, wool socks, a toothbrush, a photograph, a handkerchief, a pocket knife, a chapstick from a shelter in Providence, a small chain from a Christmas ornament she had picked up off a sidewalk in Boston when she was 17 because it was pretty. That was it. That was everything. She thought of the 9-year-old girl on the church steps. She thought of the 15-year-old on the sidewalk in Worcester with a bloody nose. She thought of the 22-year-old behind a laundromat in Boston, the night Wendell Crane had walked into her diner and said her full name. She thought of them all, the girls she had been, and she said in the quiet of her own bedroom to the empty bag in her hands, "You did enough." Her voice cracked. "You did enough. You can put it down now." She stood up. She put the bag back on the shelf. She closed the closet door. Outside, the wind moved in the pines. Small flakes of snow were beginning to fall past the window. Down the hill, warm yellow lights glowed from 8 small cottages between the trees. 8 locked doors, 8 sets of keys, 8 people who knew for certain where they were sleeping tomorrow night. Marigold walked to the top of the stairs. She sat down on the top step. She rested her elbows on her knees. She looked down at her home, at her mother's teacup on the kitchen table, at the fire in the hearth, at the photograph on the mantel. And she let herself have one small thought, just one. This is what he meant. Alistair. This. Not the money, not the trust, not even the truth, but the space at the top of your own stairs where you can sit down and not have to go anywhere. 2 months later, another county van pulled into Thorn Harbor. A woman got out, 60-something, silver braid, winter coat too thin for the season. She had come to volunteer. Her name was Marla. She had spent 40 years as a social worker in the state of Maine. Marigold shook her hand. Marla looked at her for a long moment. You look familiar. Have we met? Marigold smiled softly. Yes. When you gave me a blanket, I was 17. I was crying in a hallway because a boy in the men's dorm had said something. You sat next to me for 10 minutes. You did not ask me what was wrong. You just sat there, and I remember thinking, that woman does not know me, and she is still here. Marla's eyes filled. She did not say anything for a moment. Then she said, I sat with a lot of girls. I know. I don't remember all of them. I know. But I remember thinking, whichever one stopped needing to sit in that hallway, that was going to be my life's work. Marigold looked at her. Then she looked out at the small cottages, at the smoke rising from the little chimneys, at Winifred, walking down the path with a basket of muffins for the residents. She looked back at Marla. You already did your life's work. Would you like to see what happened next? Marla nodded. She could not speak. Marigold took her arm. They walked down the path together. That night, Marigold Ashcombe stood on her rebuilt porch and watched snow fall on 8 cottages on a leaning fence. Barnaby was going to fix in the spring on the winter garden. Her mother had covered with burlap that afternoon on the mailbox at the end of Black Pine Lane, which now in fresh white paint said one word, home. She thought for a moment of Vivian Thorne. She did not know where Vivian was tonight. She realized need to. She thought of Alistair, his voice on the video. I am so sorry. She whispered to the pines, to the snow, to the ocean below the cliffs, to no one. I know. Then she said the other thing. She had spent a long time unable to say. Thank you. She walked back inside. She closed the door. She locked it. Once. She did not need to check it twice. Then she went to sit in the kitchen with her mother, where a cup of tea was waiting, steaming, and a chair, pulled out, for her. Because sometimes a legacy is not a house, or a fortune, or a name on a plaque. Sometimes a legacy is just a chair, pulled out for a girl who spent a long time believing no one had ever saved one for her, and a mother who has spent just as long learning how to wait, and a fire that does not go out overnight, and a lock that does not have to be checked 3 times. Because home was never a building. It was the moment, that one moment, when Marigold Ashcombe sat down and decided to stay.